Good evening and welcome to the July 16th meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Delisa, would you lead us to the pledge?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we reach the agenda, I want to welcome our new member, representative from the Planning Board and also a member of our happy group, Delisa Latirzo. And I thought it'd be a very good idea if we just introduced ourselves, one-liners, other committees that you're on and what you have done or had been doing as a profession so that we can refresh our acquaintance and give you an opportunity to at least to know who we are and where we're coming from, as well as to be introduced to you as well. Mike, we'll start with you.
Mike Fontanella, I'm currently the chairman of the school committee. I was on the master plan update steering committee, and I work for my wife doing database development.
And I'm Delisa Laterzo. I was on the Economic Development Committee. I'm now on the Planning Board on, Mpic, and also the Littleton Station Working Group. I own Touchmark Promotions in town, and I've been in marketing my entire life.
Lyle Webster, Littleton lifer, and asked last year to join this esteemed body to bring my 30 years in architecture forward for the master planning for Littleton. So architect all those years, and also Vivint Solar, helping save the world with clean green power.
There's no one around that can top that one. All right, I'm Mike Zeldin. I served on the Master Plan Steering Committee and have been on the Implementation Committee since its formation milliseconds after the Master Plan was done. I'm supposedly a retired venture capitalist and molecular biologist. Oh, and I'm also on the the Board of Health.
Jonathan Leibowitz. I've been on the Master Plan Implementation Committee since the start. I've been a member of the Historical Commission for quite a few years now. I'm sort of retired as a professor of history at UMass Lowell. That is to say, I'm officially retired, but I teach a course occasionally here and there. And I've lived in town for 25 years.
He left out the most important thing for our committee, which is he really knows a great deal about economics. Fair to say?
I know something about it.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that,
No one knows a great deal about economics. That's the problem with economics.
All right. Okay.
And Lauren.
Yeah, I was getting to her. Please give me a second because I've been warned. All right. Maren, shall we say, is in fact very much part of our group. Maren, please.
Thank you. Maren Tuchel, town planner. I was through the master plan 20 years ago when we did the first one in forever in town, and very excited to be part of the implementation committee because we've seen a lot done and have a lot more on our plates to get through.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much. And I'm suggesting that we take a brief moment or brief moments and do reorganization. This will allow us to move forward because I'd like to get us in a position to not only go in front of the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board, but also in front of the town and the residents with our, shall we say, initiatives going forward in the coming years. In other words, and we will find that the town meeting comes upon us very quickly. So I want to make sure that if we want to undertake or have others undertake projects that require funds from the town, or we need to apply, in addition to apply outside, that we're in a position to do that. And to give you forewarning, I do have a few things in mind, but I want the wisdom of our board. So I'm going to propose that we, unless there's an objection, that we move to reorganization. And to keep things simple, we generally have chairman, a vice chair, and, quote, a clerk. And I'm never quite sure what the clerk does for us, since Maren basically runs the show anyway. So
That's why it's the best job.
yeah. So it's, I think that to keep it simple, I want to try to stick with that unless there's an objection. So the two positions is chairman and vice chair, And let's start with the chairman. Does anybody have any ideas who would like to see as chair again?
I nominate Mike Zeldin.
I'll second that.
Anyone else? All right, so,
Stuck.
no, I don't, it's just fine, I like you guys a lot. I mean, it's a pleasure working with you, really.
We have to actually officially vote on it, so we gotta say all those.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I hear a nomination, a second for Zeldin to be the chairman going forward. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, now we move on to vice chair. I'm going to nominate Mike Fontanella.
Second.
I hear a second. Any objection, any discussion? I hear none. I'll then move that we vote. All those in favor of having Mike Fontanella as vice chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I guess so.
All right.
Good.
All right, good. Thank you very much. I'd like to now turn to the issue of setting goals. And this is not just, as it were, an administrative activity. For us, it's what we do, and this will lay out what we want to do next. There are already things in progress, as you know. And we had originally an initial 7, and they're in various, as we expected, various stages of progress. So now the question turns on, what do we want to do to not only reinforce, but also, do we want to start anything new? I think the sentiment for the committee so far has been, we are not looking to get the town involved yet in anything, shall we say, extensive beyond what's already in the master plan in the original 7, because it does cover such things as not only the needs assessment for this building, but also connected with it is I'll call it a community center for those who have an interest in need services of a community center, along with the sewering, the revitalization of the common, and probably very significant, the diversification of housing options in the town. So I've skimmed over basically a lot of the key 7 components, which are, as I said, in progress in various stages, being led by primarily the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. So I guess I'll invite comment at this point. I'm making this suggestion mainly because as I indicated in our last meeting, before I move on, I want to come back. I did ask, and Mike Fontanella and Chase both agreed to undertake the task of providing some clear, consistent communication to the town in general about how the master plan is doing. Because it has a tendency, it all seems sensible to us, but I'm sure to some people in town, it seems like fragments. So this way, we're trying to put together a coherent story, an account, an update of where we are. And I'm just going to ask Mike very quickly, where does that now stand in terms of?
Really no further than when we agreed to do it. Chase has been traveling, I've been traveling, but I'm done traveling, so this week and next, I will start to come up with some ideas and framework to pitch to him that we can then smooth out and bring forward towards you guys. So it's definitely on the top of the to-do list, and we'll get moving on that.
Yeah, I think our aim is to have this prepared and ready to go and go out in advance of the town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not an insignificant thing we're trying to accomplish here. And it's more or less a gathering of forces. And I think it's fairly important that we do that. In the meantime, I think that any opportunity we have, whether it's third Thursday or other meetings we attend, it would be worthwhile as members or liaison to other committees to make them aware of the fact there is a master plan and the various components do intertwine and affect each other, and the fact that things are ongoing. Very often this gets lost. There's still a silo, instinct to silo, and that's not what we're trying to avoid that. Okay.
Just a quick question,
Yes.
Mike. I seem to remember at the last meeting, it wasn't quite clear that Chase was going to continue as the selectman's representative. Will he?
Yes, it's been confirmed that he will. I wouldn't have, I'm sorry, yes, he will be continuing. And Megan sends her regrets, by the way, that she couldn't make tonight's meeting. Otherwise, we would be able to give her some more jobs to do. Okay, all right. In setting the goals, I'm just going to come back to the theme I started at the last meeting, which is when I went to for convenience, go to the foldout and go to the second last column, where you will see estimates given in dollar sign. And that started a process. And I'll best summarize it this way. That the ability of the town to finance many of these projects, many of which are capital projects, they're not simply expenditures, appears on the surface to really be a big challenge to the town. Because if you take a look at, on the back of the envelope calculation of what is left over in any fiscal year after money has been spent for the schools and other obligatory items, capital or not, debt service, schools, retirement benefits, that sort of thing. My best, back of the envelope calculation is that it's probably a low of maybe 2 million, maybe every once in a while it hits 6, but that's rare. This is historic and very rough, but it's not anywhere near enough to do this. So to do many of the projects that we want without, quote, floating a debt, basically floating a bond. So I began looking at what's going on in town with regard to this, and even though I'm aware of the fact we are not, technically speaking, the financial arm of anything, it's in the master plan to basically address this issue, whether it's explicit or implicit. And since our job is to provide guidance, that's where I'm heading. So the next step I took is, why do we do things incrementally? Why do we do things episodically? And then the best way I can describe it is this way. I think, I'm not sure, but I'd like to ask the question, what is our debt to revenue ratio practice? And the reason this is important is because this is what municipalities use to decide what is their debt limit. From what I can see, and I have to say that I come from a corporate world, not from a municipal world, we're nowhere close, not even close to exhausting that ratio. In other words, we are not efficiently using our revenue to debt ratio in order to accomplish certain capital projects. Now, there may be a reason why we're not, and I don't have an answer.
Hasn't there been a big, determination for many years? I think Paul Glavy has particularly pushed this, that we should not try and go over the, whatever they call it, the debt limit that has to be voted on by the town, that we should not exceed that.
The levy.
And so
The levy, that's a different issue.
that's a different.
Yeah, it's
I'm
not
following that.
Okay,
then.
all right. Here's what I'm talking about. When we want to build a school,
Yeah.
we're not going to build a school. We want to build something, and let's say it's $25 million, and it's going to be paid for over a period of 10 or 15, 20 years, let's say, 15, 20 years. What the town generally does is it issues a bond.
Yeah.
And there are outside folks who invest in this bond because of the nature of the investment. And we borrow N number of dollars.
Yeah.
Okay, we
I
borrow those
understand
dollars, okay? So what I'm suggesting, I'm just asking the question. I don't think the answer is as clear. It's not, if you look at what the town does and how it's practiced, it doesn't look as if, I'm just going to ask the question, that we actually use our revenue and debt ratio as I don't know what it is that we use to guide us to make a decision, no, we're not going to borrow more than a certain amount.
Well, I mean, the amount that we have available to fund, when we collect taxes inside the levy, and then we add in the local aid and any other minuscule streams of revenue that are left to grants and things like that, we have a certain amount of dollars to spend, and we spend it pretty much every year. We will do some funding of, contingency funds and rainy day funds, and there are specific financial policies regarding what percentage of available cash, available revenue
right.
should be earmarked for those purposes. We can, but they're just guidelines, they're just policies. We can certainly do whatever we want. We can always revisit what our policy is. But assuming that we think that those policies are worthwhile and we're not going to violate them, that's the only way that you're going to be able to materially move the debt to revenue ratio that you're talking about, unless you get more money from the taxpayers, which is to go outside the levy, which is certainly doable, or you can try, but there's no more money to use. Well, I shouldn't say that.
You're talking about borrowing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm talking about debt. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
If you borrow more money than you have, you have to do it outside. You have to go for outside the levy. If you're gonna, no, let me rephrase that. If you're going to pay it back, and the only money available to pay it back has already been earmarked for other things, and you need to raise more money to pay that bond down, you have to go outside the levy. So the only way to change the ratio is to spend more on debt and less on operations.
I am not, I mean, you're not arguing the policy, okay? I'm only asking the question. I'm not suggesting that that this is something that should be implemented.
No,
But
I appreciate that.
that's,
But that's where the lever is. If you're gonna change that ratio, if you don't have any more money if you're not gonna acquire more money that you can use to borrow or pay off the debt, then you have to go get it out of operations, which means you're gonna be spending less on operations.
what I try to look at is the cost of debt service. I mean, we're now beginning to dive into the weeds. All I'm trying to do is to raise the question
Well, it's a perfectly reasonable question to
and just
discuss.
ask, are we really using the financial prowess of the town, not to put the town in jeopardy, but basically to better leverage what we've got?
That's a fair
That's
discussion to have.
all I'm trying to have.
And I would argue that we have not, as a town, had an explicit discussion about that since the last time that we went through and did the financial policies, which I was a part of that effort. And even that effort is one of those things where they were publicly posted meetings, we followed open meeting law, they were presented at town meeting and voted on, but nobody cares or pays attention because it's so dry and academic, it just doesn't get people's blood boiling. So you basically do it in a vacuum. And they were good decisions at the time, but you're right, we could certainly, as a community, to say, let's reopen the book on that, and we may decide to keep going down the same road, but at least we'll know we've again,
That's,
had that discussion and made that determination.
that's all I'm trying to do here. I'm not-
That discussion is to be had with primarily the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen with the support of the town administrative staff, financial administrative staff.
Well, and with the new director of financing, or finance starting,
yes.
that would be a good
And
time, once
yeah,
she gets
there's been talk
acclimated.
about, taking the opportunity to revisit a lot of things because we have some, new faces. And it's important, again, that even if we don't change course, that they understand why we are, as a community, moving in the direction that we've chosen to move into and why we're gonna continue to if that's what we decide.
So I'm putting this as one goal of ours, just as a question to raise, and our goal here is to encourage and ask the Board of Selectmen and FinCom and the professional staff to begin the process of taking a new look at this.
But your goal is to look at ways to raise money to accomplish
Well,
goals for the town, or goals of the master plan.
Well,
Is that
well,
what you're getting at?
yeah, that's sort of an interesting definition, but most of the stuff in the master plan is what the town is doing. There's nothing in the master plan that isn't town generated. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, but you started off by saying that we've got to find money somewhere to
Yes.
accomplish this.
Yes.
So you're looking at revenue sources.
Yes, and
Okay.
there's another piece to this too that, having spent a little time doing this, you know, I wanted to make sure that folks were okay with just opening the door for me or for us to go in front of the Board of Selectmen and say, this is what we suggest that you do. Even, yes, it'll benefit trying to achieve the goals of the master plan, but it's good for the town. It's part of the other thing for good financial practices for the town. It's one of the things in the plan itself.
I mean, I think the other thing to keep in mind is that what debt we service, the goal is typically to plan our debt outlay so that as the debt on one project is retired, it's earmarked for the next
Exactly.
project in line. And when you look at the master plan and you realize that the horizon is 30 years out, there's no reason to assume that nobody's, and I know you're not, Mike, advocating that, well, we need to raise more money because that means we can do everything right now.
No, far from it. No,
But on the other hand, we may never get anything done because you're right, at the current pace of how much debt we carry, I mean, you could take it out, you could march it out 30 years and forget priorities. You can just say, look, I'm just making up numbers, there's $100 million worth of borrowing in here, and over 30 years, I can tell you right now, at our current rate, we're only gonna borrow 70 at the most, so there's a $30 million gap. Making up numbers, I don't know if that's exactly how it's gonna play out. So if you don't close that gap, then now you have to start making decisions about, well, what are we willing not to do? And that might be as big a part of the discussion as anything.
That's what we're coming to. It's what we can do and what we can't do.
It's not necessarily advocating for more spending or more, taking on more debt. It's coming to the realization that if we've made a determination about where we're comfortable, then apply that to where we are here and adjust our appetites and our goals and our, dreams and desires accordingly.
Yeah, and also.
We all do it at home.
Yeah. And the other piece of this is revenue sources, which, I'm just going to briefly mention. And please, these topics are just a member's suggestion. Any of you, either tonight or any other time in the next couple of meetings, come up with other, shall we say, relevant goals. It's an open discussion. It's not closed. My second concern is what Mike just referred to, and that's the revenue stream itself. And as one of the goals, I'm suggesting, and do as politely as I can, I would like to do everything we can to stimulate, encourage, and push the Economic Development Committee and the Board of Selectmen, beginning as soon as possible, in advance of fall town meeting, to sit down and come up with a series of actions designed to attract business and revenue streams to the town. And I'm not talking about videos and stuff, I'm talking about what sort of direct marketing effort is Littleton going to do. Littleton does not do direct marketing. We don't have booths at business associations or professional associations and say, here's Littleton, here's who we are. We don't do it. The only group, ironically, that has booths and advertises what they're doing and encourages others to join them is the Agricultural Committee. They are active in promoting agriculture in this area and in Littleton. So I'm just giving you that there is someone out there doing it, however, down a particular pathway. Now, I don't want to exclude them. I'm just giving you an example. But as far as I can make out, we have never launched an effort where we aggressively, purposefully, directly go out and say, okay, we're going to target the following, and here's, if that's a good idea, and see what we can do to attract businesses that represent to us a potential revenue flow.
Have you looked at other communities that have done this and have been successful in doing this? I don't know. I'm just asking that as a question. If we haven't done it, is that because we're different, or is everybody else not doing it because they all are thinking that it isn't going to materialize in anything, or what exactly?
I can answer that. Most other communities have economic development directors, somebody on staff, on town staff, that is focused on that. It's not a committee of volunteers.
And
So-
do they I mean, I would venture to say that in the 25 years I've been here, Littleton has developed quite a lot economically, and I wonder if
The other,
other communities have done less because, have developed more because they've had somebody pushing it. Could we develop more because we don't have somebody pushing it?
so there are a few problems right now with Littleton faces there aren't a lot of spaces for new businesses to come in. You know, the Common doesn't have much. There's the mill, which is dilapidated, so you can't really market anything in downtown, in the Common area until the form-based code has been implemented, right? And then out on Taylor Street, there is some movement there. Maren and I are both part of the Littleton Station Working Group, where we're looking at how can that whole area be developed, how much of it should be housing, how much of it should be commercial development, and so forth. But we're talking, that's down the road. But we do have a meeting Thursday night to talk about the results of a survey. So there are things that are being done, but in terms of actually getting out there and marketing Littleton, there isn't a lot to market right now because we don't have space. There's no place for businesses to go. Would you agree with that, Maren? I mean, that,
Yeah, a lot of the business district is already developed, and to
Right.
encourage redevelopment, you've got to update the zoning.
right,
You know, we certainly have the benefits of, 3 exits off of Route 495.
Yeah.
And to be able to position the town to take advantage of that, so that traffic is concentrated only in the business areas and not affecting a lot of the residential areas.
But to
Right.
both Jonathan and Delisa's point, some of that is happening organically. We are bigger and more busy commercially than we have ever been as a community. There's no arguing that. And there is a finite amount of new development available. Now, you could conceivably start to replace existing commercial with more lucrative commercial endeavors, but that's a whole nother animal.
but I think that's exactly what our objective is, right, in the Common area.
Well,
Is to
it's-
replace all those dilapidated buildings and put in mixed use, blah,
Correct,
blah, blah.
there is room
Yeah.
for that, and that's like, that would be easier than, but like, Taylor Street's been sitting there, developed, ready to rock and roll. Now, you could say, okay, well, they were developed in a manner 20 years ago that was appropriate for the time and area, and they didn't keep up with and that's entirely true. But on the other hand, it's highly unlikely that they're gonna raise all those buildings and start over from scratch, because the investment required against the potential for recouping that investment would seem to me to be.
So we are looking at ways to repurpose those kinds of buildings, and in fact, one of them, I think that deal's gone through, right? Being turned into a fulfillment house for
Yeah.
e-commerce. But looking at there are a lot of other things that could be done, and we're looking at other communities to see what they've done. But I think one of the things we want to make sure is that we develop a kind of master plan for Littleton Station so it doesn't grow organically, because that will probably end up being just a bunch of tract houses, which we don't want. So,
Well, before we get.
correct me if I'm wrong here, Maren, I mean,
The thing that is missing is the fact that until Littleton actually has done something about, frankly, turning the Common and frankly, the station area into something more that needs infrastructure, you will not be able to do very much, make proper, efficient use of the land unless you have the appropriate infrastructure. And it will take quite a bit of funds and a lot of torture for the station area to acquire that infrastructure, whether it's mixed use or not. There are issues about using it as it is. It needs infrastructure.
and that's being addressed. We're looking at that.
Yeah.
And the thing about the Common already is that most of the property owners, many of the key property owners in the Common, who have shall we say, the resources to do so, have already expressed a strong interest in we're ready to move when Littleton moves. What I'm interested in is they will build, or they will do it, as long as there are customers, as it were, as long as there's someone to occupy those spaces. And I'm talking about both housing as well as, I would say, 21st century industry, which is not a lot of stuff that we've got yet. We still have like 1 and 2 and 3 people businesses in town, which are fine. And our largest employer, there's maybe 6 people from Littleton who work there. So that's the other piece of this, which is, do we have the potential for job creation in Littleton? And as far as, it's not that I think the common, there are only a few areas, very frankly, in Littleton where this could, at the moment, where this can be visualized. The one place I think we've got it going more sooner rather than later, that's why I want to be prepared for it, is fortunately or unfortunately, the common. It has all the components in place. The train station has great potential longer term, but let's put it this way, the common has a better chance of being ready to go more immediately, and I just want to get at least the Economic Development Committee and the Board of Selectmen on board to at least start thinking about how to market.
Well, I think the first thing, the EDC has 3 vacancies right now, so until those are filled, I think you just need to wait until those
We
positions are
can't,
filled.
the time's too short.
Like, they don't have the bandwidth.
Okay, we've run into this before, when someone doesn't have the bandwidth, all right? Is there any particular thing that would stop us, or anything that would discourage us for searching for outside funds that the town could be prepared to match? So that we could begin designing or begin putting in place such a marketing, for example, a marketing expert, you mentioned it before.
Well, I think you're both talking about the same thing, whether it's bodies on the committee or staff to the committee, or somehow, there's got to be a good solution, pieced together solution for how we're going to address economic development. Yeah, it's time and staff and volunteers working together to find the funding and decide what the next steps are. But until you get the direction.
What do you mean direction?
Well, that probably wasn't a good word to use until you get the volunteers and the town to dedicate staff to addressing it.
Well, okay, there'll be a vote of some sort come fall, moving ahead with or without a sewer, right? And at that point, it becomes very real. Or not. And I'm just looking at the calendar and saying, okay, if the vote goes through, we have to be prepared, the town has to be prepared. Is this a sufficiently compelling situation? And I realize there's always a risk, it may not happen, okay? Is there sufficient compelling reason for us, that means this committee, to undertake this and ask them to join in? I'd just like to,
No,
that's why I'm
I
here.
don't think so, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think anything that you're throwing out there hasn't been discussed or considered by the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board. Whether or not they're considering it with the same level of priority that you have, or that we have as a group, that's certainly open for debate. But just because it's not, doesn't mean we can then circumvent their role or just say, well, we'll do it. Unless they say, why don't, unless we ask them, do you want us to do it? And maybe they're okay with that. But it has to, that's how the process has to go. The other thing is that I appreciate what you're saying about now's the time, but what if the vote fails? Then we have to retrench and think about what's the best way to move forward on the common. You might be getting, the cart in front of the horse. So I think there's plenty of time once that vote's taken. If it's a positive vote, we'll have plenty of time, because it's still gonna be a couple of years out while they go ahead and actually execute on the build before there's any opportunity for development. And I think that you can close the gap in terms of your marketing and resource effort to attract the right kinds of development. I don't have a particular problem with that. And I think, honestly, I've never heard that explicitly stated, but that would be my guess as to why maybe the Board of Selectmen doesn't have the same zeal that you have at this particular moment in time. They might go right past you in terms, and they might go right into say, now's our time to have an economic development director on staff, rather than waiting for relying on community volunteers.
I would prefer frankly.
I think our
Tricia.
role is we can hold their feet to the fire. We can ask the question like, hey, the master plan says, and we think that, you know, if you guys don't get going, then you're gonna miss out, or we're not gonna be able to maximize our opportunity. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Okay.
But to grab the reins, no, we'd be outside our.
Well, we
our
couldn't
purview.
grab the reins unless we actually involved the Economic Development
Right.
Committee and the Board of Selectmen in the process, like we did for the
Right.
the common. They were involved, and they said, go ahead, run with it, after we picked up and ran with it. So, no, I hear you, I just would like to basically bring it up to consciousness, and
Yeah.
that's the follow-through that I'll follow.
And the other thing to keep in mind is, as the duly re-elected chair of the committee, you can certainly go chair to chair and say, look, we had a discussion about that, can you update me on where your board is with this, because we feel it's important, and then, depending on the answer you get, you can come back and tell us, well, geez, you know, they really didn't give me like a warm fuzzy feeling. I think we need to get on their agenda and push. Or you might come back and say, oh yeah, they're definitely in line with our vision, and this is what they want, you know, want to wait for this particular jump off point, and we're good to go.
I'll have that conversation, and I do appreciate your comments. I'm just want to make sure I don't get out in front of you folks.
So
yeah.
talk to Carolyn Armstrong. She's the new chair of the EDC. And I know that there are a couple people that I know of so far applying for the 3 positions. But certainly if you guys know of anybody, encourage them. Because I think it certainly could play a much more important role as the years go on.
Yep. Okay,
I'd just like to be a little skeptical about that. I'm just not sure that economic development commissions are effective. I mean, who am I to be a free marketer, but I think somehow that maybe, I mean, a market sort of, if the market is there and people want to do it, then they do it. I mean, you know, look at the Point. I mean, this is an enormous development for Littleton, and I don't think anybody sort of came in. I mean, Sam Park saw a chance and did it.
So they can be very effective. I served on the Economic Development Committee in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, for about 5 years. And one of the things we did, and we did very well, was looking at, was there a certain kind of industry we wanted to attract, and then getting the word out that, hey, Steamboat is interested in attracting these kinds of businesses. Here's what we can offer you, blah, 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 blah. So it can be effective if it's done properly. So I'm just
I've heard
speaking
of-
from my
yeah,
personal
yeah, and-
experience.
and there's many reports that there are many towns our size and slightly larger. Acton, for example, did hire someone to do economic development, and the report is that for any number of reasons, mainly having to do with just the way Acton is composed politically, she never had a chance to really, as it were, have a go of it.
But I think, again, you need to have the infrastructure, you have to have the buildings, there are a lot of things you have to have that we're looking at. It looks like we're going to have, but right now, I don't think it warrants hiring anybody.
It'd be hard to justify.
Yeah,
to do it,
absolutely.
but it
They're
would-
just-
You'd be selling fantasy
Yep,
at this point.
yep.
But the idea is to give it some, at least to bring it to the level of awareness, as both of you have pointed out, find out where the Board of Selectmen might be, and then encouraging the EDC not only to recruit people, but also to get involved and weigh in.
Well, yeah, and you set the tone, too.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it does become just kind of haphazard. It's really up to the developers who they bring in, and you could end up with a bunch of stuff that people don't even want. So,
I mean, I have seen marketing efforts done at business association meetings by towns, and they're focused on very particular kinds of industries that fit, just as you
yeah,
probably did.
like niches.
Yep, and we don't, when you look at the revenue streams that are possible for us in this town, you know, it's a small number. I mean, there's certain things, given our resources and our size, that I don't think we're going to have much of a chance to get. In other words, it would be lovely to say we can get 2 more IBMs in here, but I don't think that's, I'm not sure we need that, but or want that, but that's where things are. Okay, so is there any other goals that you would like to have us set? Or do you want to wait for yet another meeting? Because I can put in what we've got so far. and just simply, add on, because we've got already at least 3 or 4 initiatives here beyond what are things that we want to accomplish this year.
Would it make sense to relook at those, our original 7? It's 2 years now that we kind of came up with those seven goals, and to see where we are with them. I mean, some of them we know because we've been focusing on them. Some of them have maybe slipped through the cracks. Some of them, without knowing it, have actually been accomplished, and some things like that. Would it make sense to do that?
Well, I don't know if this was a setup, Jonathan, but as far as I can make out, only the historic survey of Littleton actually has been wrapped up and put to bed almost.
Right.
Okay, that's the only one. Okay.
All right, well-
All the rest, all the original 7, are in progress in various stages. And for example, I'm a member of the Sewering Task Force, and that's part of the implementation for the common. And I think most of us know where approximately that is, but it's up. I can certainly ask them for an update. You're going to be probably getting one through the Board of Selectmen, which I'm pretty sure you'll get. The Space Needs Committee, the task force, is still trying to figure out what to do about here, and only recently has the door opened a bit, maybe wider than we realized, with the announcement that the library, as far as I can understand, has secured their funding from
Yep.
the state,
Yep,
I didn't know that.
yep.
which translates into town meeting, agreeing or not, for basically another borrowing to fund it, fund the remainder.
Okay,
So that, with the library, as it were, going to be moving out of here within, I guess, it's a 2-year build?
I don't know.
I mean, I'd be surprised if it would be more than that, a 2-year build. Then you're looking at this building becoming seen in a different light. As far as housing is concerned, the most, shall we say, visible, and Maren, you're probably in a better position than anyone to tell us what's going on. Just capsule.
Right, for housing, the town can basically set the table, and we have the table set with some amended zoning bylaws that address housing, including affordable housing. We have 2 senior residential developments one is under construction, one looks to be going under construction soon. So at least we have the cottage-style homes available, clustered cottage-style homes available within a couple years. But then if we do form-based code in Littleton Common, that will open up the opportunities for some, hopefully, apartment-style, small number of apartment styles there. So we have some of the zoning in place to do that, and we're doing the planning to draft and gather support for some of the other zoning that would help address the housing. But that's, I would call that a long-term issue as well.
Yes, so,
well, a lot of them are underway. I mean,
yeah, there's a lot going on. It's one of the reasons why I'm not that tempted, as it were, to start taking a look. I mean, the one that is at the moment, I don't know where that one, the one is about a community center, because that one is still, I think, under discussion. At the moment, I think things are momentarily quiet, and it could bubble up again. But I think to go out, I don't think the Council on Aging or the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board needs any more encouragement to basically keep their eye on this. I think they're very much aware. And I'd just like to say, this is, again, ironically, testimonial to the fact that it's the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen who are doing most of the heavy lifting. I'll say all the heavy lifting to get things done.
Can I ask a question? Because one of the things I was going through, getting ready for this meeting, just trying to come up to speed, was, just reading the roadmap, and I know this is just for the common, but I was looking at the action matrix. And one of the things I noticed was talking about, like, establishing temporary art displays, event planning, and I noticed that the cultural committee had not been listed there, which then led me to think, all right, this is the list of all the boards and committees in
Sure.
town. Do all of these boards and committees have, or in some way, are their goals linked up to the master plan and the roadmap? Because
far as
the
I-
cultural committee is not.
I would say that very few of the committees, with few exceptions, have made the effort to link up even when asked to do so.
Okay, and that's unfortunate, right? But maybe then it's an opportunity for us to go to them.
Yes,
And because it's a way also of delegating. You know, there's no way that the planning board, the board of selectmen, and Mpic can do everything that needs to be done in this town. And there are a lot of small things that can be done. So if we can get more of the committees involved, we may see a little bit more action. So I've already reached out. I just took it upon myself to reach out to a couple of people I know on the cultural committee to make them aware of this and say, all right, you guys should be linking up your goals to the master plan. Were you even aware of this? They were not. Now, maybe the information got lost somewhere, who knows? But
Well, initially, I think a lot of the goals in the master plan came out of different,
came out from the very committees you've got listed.
right,
there.
but remember, there's turnover on these committees.
Yes,
So-
and the other thing too is that, yes, you can visit the committees and point it out to them, but as I'm sure you've experienced, the way some of these committees operate is meetings, quorums, all sorts of other issues, they are not that active. So they don't have these kinds of very, shall we say, active discussions and active desire. To them, somebody else is taking care of it.
So I know the cultural committee is a lot more active now. I also know that, what is their name? The pedestrian, what's it called?
Bicycle and pedestrian.
Yes. They've
got
gotten a lot more active, and I hear there's some thoughts there, there's some grants they want to go after. Anyways, I just think that maybe it's time, and maybe you have to do it once a year. Just reach out to, especially when committees have been reorged and you've got new chair people, reach out to them.
Well, that's why we're meeting here to do, that's basically first line contacts and message. This is, we're undertaking exactly what you're describing.
Right.
That's what we're
Part
trying
of-
to do,
yeah.
yeah. So I'm glad that you contacted the cultural committee, and
Well, the reason I brought this up was just because I thought we were
Sure.
talking about goals,
So-
and that's a goal.
So the question is, and what I was looking for from our group here is suggestions or which committees should we be encouraging and looking at today? I happen to pick on the EDC for my spiel. I'm interested to hear what others want to do about our effort. What other committees should we target? If any, what I'm asking is that,
Well, I think we should target all of them. I mean, I think that on an annual basis, I think we have to be cognizant of touching base with all of them to at least, again, make the effort to,
okay,
it may be fruitful in some instances and frustrating in others, but we can't just ignore it. I think that has to be part of our, annual process. I mean, it's exciting and interesting to, work closely with the planning board and the board of selectmen on the big sexier items, but, we have a charge to go after the, and I think that we owe it, to all the people who worked on the master plan update steering committee to not ignore
yeah.
the other stuff, and the best way to do that is exactly the way you have it phrased here, first line contacts and
Yeah.
message. We got a first line, we gotta be in there with them, and, they should be seeing one or two of us 2 or 3 times a year, every year.
Yeah, we started this.
Some are gonna see us much more.
Yeah,
but-
we did start, go ahead, Mike.
No, we were doing this, as it were, last year, and we're gonna have to reignite, or ignite. And the only difference is that I found that if you walk in with something specific, I think with the cultural folks, now that you've got the link from the roadmap, which, sort of, that's a little easier to walk in and say, look, this is what the master plan or this, or the roadmap calls for. We're going to try to bring something different into the common that now exists, this in particular. So let's say we were going to another committee, pedestrian committee and the bicycle committee, is perfectly clear why we would go to them, because we're looking not just for the common but elsewhere in town to make it more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. So that's a particular mission you can talk about. So in using the, shall we say, the foldout about what their role would be, what I'm seeking is input as, is it worthwhile to come in with something rather specific and not somebody say, oh, look at the master plan and see how you fit in? Should we do some of the stuff for them and say, okay, you know, you could undertake the following? Am I being clear what I'm asking here?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Mike. I mean, I was assigned to a bunch of the sort of conservation type.
Right, yeah.
Type groups, and I talked to them, and it was a good sort of beginning maybe, but in a lot of cases, I mean, particularly the Conservation Commission, they're so much a permitting body that they don't have much time to think about some of these other things. So if you came in with something specific, that might be helpful. And I think sort of also, which I did do, talk to the Conservation Trust, and again, sort of bring something that might be specific that we could suggest that they look at. I do think that's a good idea.
Okay, well, there's an opportunity floating out there that it's a small amount of money, but a small amount of money has been put forward to try to bring together or try to look at open and development space to try to coordinate the two of them. And as far as I know, nothing's happened so far on that?
Correct.
Okay. So that's, so let's say, I'm just pulling this out of the sky because there's money there. Who actually would undertake that? Who do you think's in a better position to undertake it at this point? If we walked over to them and said, look, there's 12 grand sitting there, you can do something with this, along the lines of the master plan.
Yeah, I would start asking the question of the Open Space Implementation Committee, because they have the broad reach of the various groups,
Okay,
you know.
okay.
I'd ask them how
So
they'd like to approach it.
there's something specific.
Yeah, so you're right, that's one of the specific goals that we
Yeah.
now have funding for. that-
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm just simply saying that, Delisa, do you have some other ideas about specific committees that we could give a specific mission to if we walk in and say, look, this is,
One of the things that was kind of surprising to me when I joined EDC was how very few people, in fact, almost nobody, had even looked at the economic development section of this. Now, I know it's on the website, but I wonder if even just, like you guys were just talking about historical, right? So on page 119, there are a bunch of goals there.
yep.
And actually, some of them are more tactics than goals. But I wonder, has that been shared recently with people? Like for example, has an inventory of historic structures and heritage landscapes in Littleton been?
Yes, the answer is
As
yes.
Mike has just said,
Yeah,
that is
that's
the
been
one
done.
Oh, that's the one, okay, I just picked that one, yes, okay.
accomplished.
What about updating the historic inventory and data collection forms? Like, what I found so great
Okay,
about
to
this.
include heritage landscapes, that we haven't done, but,
So a lot of these goals are already in
Yes,
here, a lot
yes,
of these ideas. So it's just reminding people, or maybe just,
Reading it to them?
no, I think it's emailing it to them instead of, just the goal section. I do,
Okay,
We
fair
may
enough.
not, sometimes people have to be spoon-fed, and that's just,
I'll be very happy to be the spoon.
And the good news is we have a lot of the introduction letters and the
Yes,
assignments
we're
and
ready to
everything
go.
that
We're ready to go, yep.
Yeah.
started on 2 years
Yep.
ago.
So we'll revive this, and we'll just expand the list of folks that we send emails to.
well, and I was wondering with
actually, gee, I'm looking
feedback.
at these things for the historical commission, we've done a bunch of these.
Yes, you
See, so that's great, but then we should be communicating that you guys have done that.
Yes, every time I report, I always make it clear that they're ahead of the.
Right, but.
Lead from
but-
the front. You've done it. Show the groups what you can get done if you just pick something to get done
Yeah.
and do it.
Well, and we got some money to do one of those things. It's very helpful.
Oh, so, well, but, you know, I think also, there are a lot of grants available. Like EDC, I kept hearing that, well, we don't have any money, and I asked, well, has anybody looked into grants? No. But again, you know, it's volunteers. I mean, this is, you know,
Yeah.
it's limited time.
Sometimes we can't afford the volunteer philosophy. It's just the
You know,
old-fashioned
but a lot
way.
of- Yeah, I know, but a lot of us have full-time, you know,
Yes, all of us
60,
have full-time
70-hour
stuff.
jobs, so.
That's all? Okay. That's all, okay. All right. I think we were pretty clear on the goal setting and the first line contacts and message. I think that we can be pretty specific in many cases. Good. Okay. Any further discussion on this? I mean, we could spend some more time on this, but I think we pretty well have go ahead,
We
please.
could go away and, as Delisa has done, read a little bit more and say, have we done that? Could we share that? So come back next meeting with suggestions of who we might share particular topics with.
Agreed. We should spend at least one more meeting on this, and I think in the meantime, Maren and I, and if you want to get involved, I mean, you've got one of the reasons I'm not looking to do more is because you've already got a full portfolio. But fresh eyes are always welcome. So if I can, if there's a matchup you see here, I'd be interested in hearing about it. Same for you, Mike, if you see a matchup that looks particularly ripe, I could, get out an early email and do a follow-up visit if necessary. Okay, member input. Any more member input? I was at, this is just general information, I was at the selectmen's meeting last night where a discussion about the placement of the marijuana, recreational marijuana facility will be placed. There's apparently 2 candidates who've made the survival through the selectmen's portion of the review process. And they're about to announce who is or who will be the, shall we say, likely candidates for a host town relationship, which is important for this facility to make sense for Littleton. And in the audience were folks who lived nearby the location on King Street, who felt very strongly that it was inappropriate to have such a facility located so near to them. It's near the Robinson Road. So that is the next step in the process, assuming the Board of Selectmen say, okay, we can enter into a relationship, we could. It now then goes on to the planning board.
I think next they go to the state.
No,
To get
next
a
they go to the planning
provisional-
board. Planning board. Goes to the planning board, because you provide, I think the planning board, if I'm not mistaken, supplies the real detail. Baron, correct me, you're in this.
You
Right,
sure it
right,
doesn't?
host community agreement first, planning board application next, and then by the time they're done with the planning board, then they'll have enough information to go back to the
I
state.
thought that they needed a provisional license from the state before the planning board.
No, you can't get a provisional license without having planning board approval, so
Okay.
we can't put them into that.
Right. So the planning board is, assuming the Board of Selectmen finishes their process in the next couple of weeks, fingers crossed with this going on, the next step will be in front of the planning board, which will have more input as to what it looks like, where it is, not location, but more about how it should appear, sort of its own little form-based code thing, I guess is the best way to describe it. However, what has been pre-approved is the zone or the area in which it was located, the area. So that's immutable. The town already accepted that when it became a yes to marijuana town.
Well, between the yes vote, the initial yes vote statewide and the bylaw that was passed with the maps that showed the areas that
Yeah.
it could house a,
Anywhere in that, and by the way, that's within the common area, so just so that you know that there's an enterprise right off the bat, okay? So just, it's amusing but ironic and
development.
interesting, okay. I think that's the only thing I've got that's updated. Do you have anything, Maren, more? Some,
oh, well, I can jump ahead to next meetings.
yeah,
So I think Delisa mentioned it already, that Littleton Station Area Study, we're going to have a report from the consultants Thursday evening at 7 o'clock at the fire station. And then July 25th, the following Thursday, have the next step in the form-based code, and that'll be in this room at 6:30 on July 25th. So we've got a lot of good things, exciting things going on. And then that'll bring us to September 5th. That's when we anticipate the planning board public hearing on form-based code for Littleton Common.
and.
Will there be a written, something, a document on July 25th, or?
Yeah, we'll have a draft for that. And for that meeting, it'll be, LCTV will cover it, and when I get the presentation, I'll post that to the website and the draft document, and hopefully to get comments on that. So we did share it with a lot of the developers and engineers and architects, attorneys, land use attorneys that work in the area, so they know about the meeting and know that the information will be coming out on form-based code.
Any particular, without naming names, any particular reaction to, on the part of the development and investment community to form-based code?
There was just an invitation to the meeting. I haven't sent out a draft yet.
Nothing
so
yet, okay.
Nothing that's ready to publish, so.
Okay. Okay, public input, I guess we're not gonna have much tonight. Any other member input?
Anything new on the sewer? I mean, I know Littleton, the commissioners are now going to get involved in it, which I think is good. Is there anything else we could be doing prior to the October town meeting?
Oh, I'm sure that there'll be events, or there will be a process in place to make sure that the town is reminded about the benefits. I mean, we are quote, supporting the sewer initiative. But at the moment, as far as I can make out, the engineering design step is, I think, near completion. And the next step would be the, getting the funds for the actual build.
That will come up at the fall town meeting?
That's what I understand the plan is at the moment. That could either be pushed out even further, for all I know. I don't think a decision's been made one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm not involved in that at all, so I haven't heard.
And it's been, as far as I know the state has been continuing to be very, very helpful in assisting the town in identifying funding sources. They've been sort of a partnership with us. So I would imagine that the results of that effort won't be known until town meeting, which is a very crucial part of the process, probably as much, if not the major portion. Is there enough funding, pre-funding available for this, or not pre-funding, existing funds, so the amount of borrowing we have to do can be reduced? And therefore, the burden carried by the town for revenue stream for it been reduced. So, but the fact that we're already discussing who's going to run the show, I think is an encouraging mark, because it's going to be between, obviously, the water department or Department of Public Works. So we'll see which of the two take it under.
There are, I mean, I lived in Pepperell when we had a sewer put in there, and there was a separate commission that was.
Yeah, a commission's different than who actually oversees and is responsible for running the district, making sure repairs get done, the installation follows principles, that sort of thing. So it's
I mean, it was a separate sewer department.
Yeah.
That ran
Well,
that ran the
it would,
operation.
it would be pretty easy for the water department, just to be perfectly blunt, to set this up.
Ah, I see.
They've already got all the little pieces in place, so.
They might very well have a sewer department within their, under their corporate structure, so to speak, but yeah.
Because they happen to operate the only sewer we have. They've
Pretty
been
sure
operating
the
sewers.
guys that they got already there are a little busy, so I don't think they're
Oh.
just gonna ask them to do it on the side.
They have to expand somewhat. Okay, minutes from June 18.
I did print out a set there. If you want to take the time now or not?
Just one copy.
I have a copy.
It's in here, but I suppose since you printed it, I might
I
as well
have-
get one.
I have a copy.
Thank you.
No, I'm good, I got it.
I just want to confirm, by the way, that Chase did in fact ask the Board of Selectmen, I'm looking at the minutes, he did follow through and asked the Board of Selectmen to start pushing at existing committees to, shall we say, do more and pay more attention to their role in the master plan. So he's followed that up, so they'll be hearing from us about that again. Any corrections, comments?
I move we approve the Master Plan Implementation Committee meeting minutes for June 18th, 2019.
I hear a motion, is there a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Our next meeting is, thanks to Maren, on August the 20th. And please do your very best to attend both of those July 18 and 25 meetings. It's good to have one or more of our faces there. And not just our
I'll be
rep.
there.
I know you will. No, not, I'm saying.
We'll both be there.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have yet another face or two to make sure that, to back you up twice, as it were, not that you need it.
I should be at both those meetings, I might leave before it's totally over, but
Yeah.
it's in my calendar.
And just as a preview, have you gotten any inkling of what the form-based code looks like these days?
I have.
Are you going to, are you dangle anything in front of us that,
No.
should we be excited?
Yes, we should.
Oh, for Maren to say this, that's significant.
You were at the last discussion in, what was it, May?
Yeah,
And the two gentlemen that were doing most of the speaking, Tim Love and
Yeah.
Dan Bartman.
Yeah.
It was just so much fun to not only hear them the first time, but then to watch the video again and really understand how much they know this stuff and how excited they were about working on us, for Littleton. So there, we had a phone conference today, lengthy discussion about code, so it was.
what a surprise, yes.
Surprise, yeah.
No, I'm very pleased. If Mpic did nothing else last year to accomplish to get form-based code underway at the Common, that's, and because that opens the door to make that place, that location, and can serve as a model for other places in Littleton. This is really, really what I'm hoping to accomplish with that.
Isn't the bank pretty much waiting too until, yeah,
Not
so,
just a bank.
Not just the bank,
Yeah.
there's at least 3 or 4 others that
yeah,
are
that's great.
jumping.
And I heard the mill's up for sale. So, I'm not supposed to know that? I don't know. The mill's
No,
up for sale.
I'm, I would celebrate.
I think
except-
that's great.
Except we still have a problem in Washington. I'd celebrate with you on
Oh.
this, but, okay. If there's no further business, I move, I'll invite a motion for adjournment, then we can have
So
our
moved.
discussion. Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Would you do the honors?
There you go. Another one in your record book.